We are live, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. All right, Council. I'd like to call this regular council meeting of February 27, 2024 to order with adoption of the agenda as amended to include the notices of motion at 6A, B, and C as Councillor Cherry has given them. Someone want to make that motion for me, please? Councillor Cherry, seconded by Councillor Devlin. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 13th. Someone make that motion. Councillor Cherry, Councillor Devlin. All in favor? Motion's carried. And the special council meeting of February 15th. Someone make that motion. Councillor Devlin, seconded by Councillor Cherry. All in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from the February 13th regular council meeting? Councillor Cherry.
Thanks, Your Worship. Community members and industry members have expressed an issue logging onto Bonfire to review the RFP. Their concerns is that there seems to be a $500 USD charge in order to create a login. I'm hoping perhaps Director Donato can provide an update to council and the public on how best to access the RFP.
Mr. Donato, if you have a comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the best way to access the RFP is through the Talk Revelstoke page. There was an issue with the Bonfire link on that page, and it has now been rectified, as well as under the bid opportunities on the city's website. The link has been rectified as well. So once an individual clicks on that link, it will take them to the City of Revelstoke procurement portal. And on that portal, there's an option to either log in or to register. So for those that are not set up with a Bonfire account, they'll need to register. And as they go through the registration process, they'll be prompted to enter an organization name. And they don't need to do that. They can just enter their own personal name if they're not affiliated with an organization, and they can just go through the steps and register as an individual, and that should provide them with access to the RFP document.
That's your question, Councilor?
It does. Perfect. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Donato. Any other business arising from those minutes? Saying none, any business arising from the special council meeting of February 15th? Saying none, I am going to move on to announcements from the mayor. So I want to say on Friday is Revelstoke's 125th birthday. So we are going to have a celebration, and that will also start our winter carnival. So at 4 p.m., planning to do an opening to our ceremony at Centennial Park, and just wonderful to have community members come out and join in the celebration. That will start things off, and we'll make some announcements at that point as well. So just encourage everyone that can come out to come out and go from there. So we have some notices of motion under 6A, B, and C. And so we want to put these notices of motion on, and then they will go to staff to prepare reports. Is that correct, Mr. Cummings? And we don't need to vote on these notices of motion. They're going to go directly through.
So correct, Mr. Mayor. So basically, Councillor Cherry is providing members of council 2 weeks notice, if you will, that these items will be coming forward. I assume the March council meeting of March I don't have a calendar in front of me. Well, thank you.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Councillor Cherry, if you want to put your first notice of motion.
Thanks, Your Worship. First note of motion is that staff be directed to prepare a report outlining the parameters of existing density bonusing program, details of all existing executed housing agreements, and outline options to allow properties subject to a housing agreement to provide a cash in lieu of units into the city's affordable housing reserve.
Any further comment? Do you want to weigh in or speak to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Some of the issues that I'm seeing are that we have current housing agreements and density density bonusing through the density bonusing programs, and we haven't seen any of these units be built or come onto the market yet. And our city's affordable housing reserve fund is wildly underfunded. These funds could be used for seed fundings for a number of different programs to create housing units in our community. I'd like to see an option for that.
Okay, great. So we'll put that forward. Staff will be able to come back with the report, and then council can weigh in at that point. Councilor Orlando?
Your worship, thank you. Just to be clear, this was put forth with a motion. Does it require a seconder? I'm just trying to brush up on my procedure on notices of motion.
Did we not call one? Sorry.
No,
Seconder.
we did not call
Yeah,
a
we
seconder.
should. Yeah, we should.
Yes,
Just
so
to
we
keep it
need,
clean.
we need a seconder. Councilor Devlin? Now, it's gonna go straight forward. We don't need to vote on it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good. So Councilor Orlando?
Your worship, just a comment regarding procedure. We haven't had a lot of notice of motion on this council, and generally we don't. I mean, just for historical or general operational wisdom on notices of motion, generally they're viewed, in my opinion, as a last sort of ditch way for a council member to get something on the agenda. A more typical path is to bring these things forward in sort of more discussion about ways to incorporate it within normal planning documents. And where I'm coming from right now is I just received these emailed to me a minute before the meeting, and there's actually a list of 3 different notices of motion, I believe. Some of them are just not worded clearly at all. I realize they will come to the next meeting and then be forth for a discussion. But at this point, if I were a staff member trying to interpret some of these notices of motion, I would be a bit unclear as to what I am being directed to do. So it says prepare a report. Does that mean a page? Does that mean hire a consultant? Obviously, I don't think that's the point here. The other sort of thing is I believe, and this is probably likely what will happen next week, because staff doesn't have an input, they will provide some direction on sort of how this fits into their existing documents. So I guess for myself, I'm leery. Generally speaking, if I were trying to put forth a notice of motion, I would seek support from other councillors, give them a heads up, let them know ahead of time, let them know what I'm thinking, and perhaps talk to staff about it. And I would just say it's unusual for me to see 3 in a row, including like the third one, which is just sketched out in wording. I would really want to be clear on what I'm talking about here. So yeah, it's my feedback.
Great, appreciate the comment. I do know that Councilor Cherry has met with all of the staff under all of the notice of motion and discussed it with them so that they felt that they would have the time to craft something appropriately and work on their timeline. Is that correct, Councilor Cherry?
That is correct.
Great.
I do appreciate the feedback. It should be noted that this isn't the first notice of motion that's come before council. I believe Councilor Lucio had a couple the last few meetings. I've also had some in the past, as I think a few others may have as well.
Okay. All right, let's move on to item number 2, your notice of motion.
Thanks, your worship. Seeking staff to prepare or hopefully get an update from BC Wildfire on the current status of the building of the facility at the Revelstoke Airport, CYRV. The city of Revelstoke has invested infrastructure to facilitate this building. With the extremely warm and temperate winter and lack of snow, I'm very worried about our fire protections around the Revelstoke area.
Do you have a seconder for that motion, please? Councilor Devlin. Do you want to speak to that a little more, Councilor Cherry?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm just looking for an update on what's happening. We haven't seen anything yet. I believe the city of Revelstoke has already updated the water pipes going to the airport for this building. I believe we were told it'd be built this summer. I'm just looking for an update on where that's heading, the timelines.
It's good. Mr. Black.
Thank you, Your Worship. As a council, there are regular meetings with MOF staff on Thursday afternoons that staff regularly attend. I'd be pleased to provide an update at the next meeting for council's consideration.
Great, appreciate that, thank you. All right, and moving on to item number 3, Council Chair.
Thanks. I'd like a report prepared for council that outlines the current contracts and operating agreements in line with Revelstoke Fire Rescue. And these outside entities, BC Wildfire, CPKC, BC Hydro, BC Parks, Parks Canada, CSRD, RMR, and Fortis, as well as Emergency Management BC, Revelstoke EPC, and the Revelstoke and Area B Emergency and Management Program. I'm bringing this forward as I'm worried that the dry conditions I'm worried that with the dry conditions, these entities pose a threat to our community, and we need to mitigate all associated risks and investigate potential external funding opportunities. And I'd like to highlight the importance of this service level review and master plan, and this report.
Seconder for that motion, please, Councilor Stapleton. Councilor Cherry, would you like to speak to that briefly, please?
Yeah, some of the items I outlined are what Revelstoke Fire can actually respond to, what resources that we actually currently have in Revelstoke, and I have an example here that Micah has 10 firefighters and Revelstoke Dam has 0. We're expected to respond to those.
Great. Councilor Lando, you have your hand up. You're muted.
Your Worship, thank you. Regarding the request for this report that's been coming forward, what is the nature of the report being requested of staff? So is staff being asked to give a 5-minute verbal update on a 1-pager, or consult with all of these agencies? I'm just wondering how much work we are going to be asking staff to do for this communications update to council.
Great. So Councilor Cherry, do you want to weigh in? And then I know that you've spoken with Chief DeRossi. If he wants to weigh in, he can, but
Chief DeRossi's got his camera on, Your Worship, if you'd like a chance to speak before me.
okay, Chief, any comment on your conversation with Councilor Cherry earlier today?
Your Worship and Council, just to maybe clarify the information coming back, as I understand, and this will be clarified a little bit more, is to assemble all the information for what agreements, contracts, and those sorts of things that we do have in place already, or perhaps that need to be updated. This is also going to be part of our service level review and master plan process. So this will be occurring hopefully complementary to what Councillor Cherry is presenting today.
Great, appreciate that.
Just the way in, that's correct, and apologies for not wording it better. I'm not much of a wordsmith, but I am working on it.
Okay. Follow up, Councilor Orlando, does that answer your question?
Your Worship, thanks. I did, I hope it's not out of order, but I did have my hand up for the previous one. Just in the notice of motion that was forwarded to me 1 minute before the meeting started, it is worded update from BC Wildfire. As a council, we can't direct BC Wildfire to provide an update. I think the intention of the wording was to request that staff provide an update in liaison front with BC Wildfire. For myself, just a warning to council that, I don't mind notices of motions coming forward, but I feel a bit blindsided with no chance to research anything here and have an understanding of where they're going on to. And notices of motion can be extremely disruptive of staff because all of a sudden we are, asking sending staff on missions, on individual missions. So that is my concern here. And I feel these wordings could have been tightened up as we move forward, and that heads up could have been given before we're doing it this way, because, you know, I don't mind having them occasionally or here and there, but 3 at the last minute with no warning is not, with unclear wording, I don't think is a good way to proceed, because it can be a huge waste of resource, or a huge draw on resources if we proceed this way. And that's my comment. Thanks.
Great, appreciate the comments, and again, I will reiterate that Councillor Cherry has spoken to each of the staff at the appropriate time, including our CAO, before these were brought forward.
Excuse me. If I may interject through the chair to Councillor Orlando, I'm having a little bit of some challenges when you're speaking on behalf of staff, or when you're speaking on behalf of council at several different meetings, and the opportunity is there for staff to speak. But when you speak about the challenges that council is presenting to staff, I'd really like for us to focus on the issue at hand. And you know, if you have an issue with, you know, a notice of a motion coming forward, that's fine. But you know, please don't speak to the capacity of staff or their workload. You know, and especially as they're reflective of the rest of council. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, I am hoping to respond to that, and that is that I'm not speaking on staff's capacity. I'm speaking on the concern that notice of motion directed council can disrupt council business, and that I acknowledge that the mayor said a couple times that this was discussed with staff. It was not discussed with council. It is not presented in any meaningful, well-worded report, or seems to be worded thoughtfully, and is just sort of random. If we want to go down this path, we can, but I'm just warning council that in terms of operation of council in a procedural matter, this can be take up a lot of time and effort, and I would appreciate a heads up. And that's it. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks to the chair. Councilor Orlando, appreciate the help with the wordsmithing on that one. I understand your concerns, and I'll try to give you more of a heads up in the future. But a notice of motion is one of our tools in our chest, and I think that these are important. But I understand where you're coming from, and thanks for that.
All right, thank you all. We're gonna move on to item 8A, Mayor and Council Correspondence Policy C3. And someone want to put that motion on the table for me, please? Councillor Devlin.
I'll move the mayor and council correspondence policy C3 be approved as amended.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Cherry, any further discussion on this motion? Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, just a question, what motivated the change?
You want to weigh in on that, Mr. Parliament? I know we have the track thing here. I don't have that open.
I need to open it myself.
It's a pretty minute change, I believe, Councillor.
Yeah, if we don't need the answer, I don't need it right now. I'm just curious what prompted it.
Okay, leave with me, Kate.
Okay.
Open it up.
Good. All right.
Thanks.
Any other comments? Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, just for clarity, in terms of the change that Councillor Palmer was referring to, I'm just seeking some clarity because I may be able to answer.
Okay, if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I'm not sure if this is coming from that, but there's some changes to the a policy. And I was curious what prompted those changes, whether it was staff or council, because there was no report with this. So that's the only contact. I know there's quite a bit that struck out of the old policy.
Yeah, it was council directed, but Councillor Orlando, you like to weigh in?
Sure, yeah, your worship. Yeah, as the mayor was beginning to say, it was council directed. There's a big section struck out in the middle, and in essence, the thought was that is repeating other policies that are already existed, and that we wanted to keep the focus on specifically emails, and then the rest of the changes are sort of on a bit by bit basis, and were subject to individual discussion, and it was mostly council directed, the changes.
Thank
you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, council. All right, we are moving on to 11A staff reports, Oscar Street master plan. And so, Mr. Simon and your colleagues, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to introduce again Mr. Penner from Urban Systems, who's a community planner who's been supporting the city with the development of master plan. Quite pleased that we've gotten into the final stages here. And Mr. Penner has a brief presentation should council wish to hear it, and then we can answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Penner, you're good to go ahead. Thank you.
Awesome, and I just appreciate everyone's time here. So I'll share my screen here quickly, and yeah, we'll just go from there. Is the presentation visible for you?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
All right. So really, and I know a lot of this information presentation was included in your agenda package, but really just wanted to do a quick review of the final Oscar, including a bit of an overview of the project, its intent, how as a guiding document, the city is to utilize it in the future, go through the 2 concept plans for the Oscar land site, and then talk a little bit about implementation and next steps. So yeah, all this information is included in the final plan and the accessory reports that came with it. So again, if there's any questions, we can take those at the end as well. So just, yeah, going back to the overview, the intent of this plan is really to be a planning and policy document that is about establishing the long-term vision, goals, and strategies for the physical development and build out of the Oscar land site for the next, 10 to 20 years. So as a strategic guiding document, it's not intended to like handcuff the city or future development proponents, but really act as a guide and something that, your staff can utilize when making decisions about proposals that are pitched, and also to inform future land disposition as a result of potential projects on that site. So the plan really provides some direction on intended land uses or proposed land uses for the site in the future, how buildings, particularly residential buildings, are to be sited, orientated, and the densities associated with those buildings, like how dense can we build up. There's a lot of information on, how do we get transportation, like vehicle and active transportation connections through the site so we can move people and vehicles through safely and efficiently and sustainably. There's direction on the servicing side of things. So what are some strategies or some ways in which we can put water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure to the site in a cost-effective way. There's direction on public amenities, open spaces, neighborhood site and character, design principles, and sustainability, environmental stewardship, and really, kind of all aspects that go into the build out of a neighborhood or a large development site such as this. There's also a series of recommendations too at the end that just say, moving forward, these are some strategies or some actions or initiatives the city can undertake to expedite and implement the vision contained within the master plan. So one key thing, and we really try to take this into the design and development of the document, is to create a guiding document for the city, but also it's for future development proponents. So it's been written in a way where prospective developer, whether it's a housing society or another proponent, can open up the document and sort of understand what the vision for the site is and use that to inform the planning design of their own projects. So again, it was written to be like very clear language, very visual, and a bit of a marketing tool as well for the city when it comes to increasing interest for development on the site. We've been working on this since last fall. So, going back to this project being identified as part of your OCP Housing Action Plan, we initiated it last fall through a 4-phase process. Some of the key deliverables or milestones that were included in that process involved a technical review and assessment of the site. So everything from lands, environment, infrastructure, topography, planning. We then developed some initial site servicing, we did some preliminary site servicing, transportation, and traffic analysis as well. So that included, we went and we set up traffic count cameras at some key intersections and collected traffic data. and use that to really try to understand like what the offsite impacts might be of future development on the site, particularly on the transportation and servicing networks for the city. We did some community stakeholder engagement, and the results of that have been summarized in the engagement summary memo, which was included as part of your package. And took the results of that analysis and some of the and sort of the feedback and input we got through community and stakeholder engagement and working with city staff and council to develop 2 concept plans, which we then reviewed internally across multiple city departments at multiple points through phase 3 and 4. So a lot of staff had the ability to provide feedback and comments. And then once we finalized those, we produced 3D renders of both concept plans, just to give that more illustrative understanding of what the intended development and build out is planned to be, and put those in a final master plan report, which also went through a bit of a review process internally with staff. So there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of collaboration internally with multiple departments throughout all phases of this project. And then just a recap on the engagement that was done. So we came out in October and did sort of a plan in a day, so a series of consecutive engagement activities from the morning well into the evening. That included 2 stakeholder meetings with representatives of local community organizations, groups. There were multiple council members who participated in that as well. We had a pop-up booth at the Save On Foods with information and some basic questions and little engagement activities for people that were going in and out of the grocery store. We had a community survey that went out as well. And we had a presentation to the Revelstoke Community Housing Society as well after this engagement was done, just to give them an update on the project and provide them with an opportunity to give comments and ask questions. So through that all, we had almost 300 people participate in all of these activities. I'm pretty happy with sort of the level of turnout and engagement that we got for this project. And there was a pretty good general consensus among people that participated, and feeling that, we really needed to take advantage of this site to maximize it for residential development, and a lot of support for the different housing types that we, sort of proposed, whether it was garden apartments, mixed use buildings and so forth. So the master plan and the concept plans were guided by sort of a neighborhood vision and some higher level master plan values. So the vision for the site is to, as a complete neighborhood, the Oscar lands provide strong connections to surrounding areas and promote sustainable modes of transportation through the inclusion of bike lanes, walking paths and transit services. Future development will respect and celebrate important natural areas and values within and adjacent to the site, ensure they are maintained and accessible for future generations. And the values, and again, these are meant to articulate some of the key themes that we heard throughout the project, whether it was from the city or from the community, kind of design elements that we needed to incorporate into the concept plans. And those can be summarized as prioritizing and addressing community housing needs. So again, really trying to maximize the land available on the site for housing development. But with that, ensuring that we're creating a complete and vibrant neighborhood. So ensuring that we have localized neighborhood commercial uses that are accessible and, internal within the site. That we have, recreation amenities, that we have open spaces, that we just have all of the other, aspects that create a good neighborhood located within the site, while at the same time promoting environmental sustainability and integration. So protecting important natural values, looking to integrate, sustainable design and other features wherever possible, and making sure that with, as the site is built out in the future, that we have a seamless transition with kind of the existing surrounding areas. So really trying to limit impacts on existing residential areas adjacent to the site and within close proximity. So again, these values came from input we received from staff, council, stakeholders, and community, and they were really foundational to shaping the planning and design of the 2 concepts that I'm about to show. So there are 2 that we created, and these are like, I need to think of a better name. I just call them block plans, but they're basically like land use outlines. They're kind of the starting point for any master planning or site planning activity. But these two block plans show the two different options, one of which is the residential mixed use concept, which is really trying to maximize the site for residential development, but also including mixed uses and other, recreation and open space amenities where possible. And then the second concept was based around allocating roughly a 5-acre portion of the site to be held as a future public use reserve area. Whatever that may be in the future, but just to show what it would look like if that amount of space was held over. And both of these concepts then get distilled down, and we start adding in for each of these areas, the siting of buildings, access points, parking areas, and start refining it down. But this is the two starting points for concepts. I'll go through each one by one here, just quickly. So for the residential mixed use concept, and again, as a concept, what these are trying to illustrate is this is what development could look like and what the yield could look like in terms of the amount of dwelling units and commercial space that we can bring on. And, in the future, the goal would be to see a build out that reflects this to the greatest degree as possible, but in a manner that also gives flexibility to future developers or housing proponents to develop their projects in a way that isn't going to be constrained by the plan. So again, it's really flexible, but the goal is we're going to try to make the build out look like this, but it may shift and pivot a little bit over time. As developers come in and they have kind of more specific building and site requirements. So again, this concept includes 345 dwelling units, ground floor commercial space. The parking layout that we've included here shows 431 parking stalls for both the commercial and residential uses through a mix of surface and underground parking in some of the larger residential mixed-use buildings. There's an outdoor recreation area that includes basketball and pickleball courts, and we coordinated the location of that with city staff. There's a large natural and passive recreation area, which is this kind of E area over here, which we included in both plans. And really the thinking here is, we have a lot of natural and environmental values like big cedar trees, a lot of, really nice kind of outdoor areas, but there are also areas that have an abundance of steep slopes and they're not really developable anyways. So let's create sort of this natural outdoor area and try to feather in trails and, low impact, recreation areas like seating areas wherever possible. And then both concepts also include, you can see the D here, a gateway area that includes transit stop, bicycle storage and other, features that promote alternative modes of transportation. So again, really creating sort of that entry point in the community, but one that includes transit and cycling infrastructure. And then you can see in the table here and in the report as well, for each of these areas or development nodes or pockets, we have a description of the land uses and the buildings that are proposed, the yield of those, how many dwelling units or square foot of commercial space would it include. Those are further broken down in greater detail in the plan. So these are the 3D renders that were developed for that initial, for concept one. So, one of the features, we've heard this from a lot of people, just concerns about, having this dense pocket of development, right adjacent to some existing residential areas. So one of the designs that we incorporated was this graduated density towards the northwestern portion of the site. So as we start to move towards the north, towards Powerhouse Road, that's where we start to see the increase in building heights and densities. And then the image on the bottom left, you can see where the outdoor recreation area is. So another key feature of this concept where we have basketball courts, pickleball courts that are accessible not just to people who reside in the neighborhood, but or on the site, but from surrounding areas as well. So a bit of a broader, recreation amenity. For concept two, so the public use reserve concept, as I was saying before, a large portion of the site has been allocated or held as, a future public use reserve area. So whatever that may be. but the remainder of the site, we really try to maximize. Basically, what would it take to get 250 dwelling units on the remaining developable portion of the site? So the result is, generally higher buildings, like higher densities, higher building heights. There's less townhomes or some of those like lower density residential uses that were included in the other concepts. And a lot of those units are concentrated in one large mixed-use building, number 3 here, that's in the development node A, which provides, again, about 120 of those units. So with that, there's also 300 parking stalls. Again, there's also some underground parking as part of some of the larger multifamily buildings. The same gateway area with transit stop and natural area and passive recreation space are included. And then, just shifting to the 3D renders of the site, you can really see, like, to meet sort of that minimum 250 unit yield, which was like a goal of the project, like, at a minimum, how can we accommodate 250 units on the site? We really had to, kind of build higher, build taller here, and concentrate a lot of those units into one large building that you can see on the bottom left-hand photo here, and another larger apartment, 4-story apartment building right across the internal road network from it. So both of those concepts, we included some initial transportation and servicing strategies. So these are really like high-level transportation servicing strategies to provide direction on how we're going to get access to the site, how we're going to move people and vehicles through the site, how we're going to provide water, sewer, and stormwater services to the site. Again, these are not like preliminary engineering designs. There's no cost estimates attached to them. It's really just saying, for people who come in and pitch projects in the future, or, as the city looks to, potentially make investments in the infrastructure needed to realize development on the site, these are some things we need to think about and consider. So for the access and transportation plans for both concepts, there's some imagery that shows, where would we put access into the site? What would our internal road network look like? Where would we position, driveways to provide access to each of those individual development pockets or nodes? Where would we want to align active transportation connections, the transit stop locations, and some additional details on like the parking, right? So exactly where are we going to put parking? What is the breakdown between, surface parking, underground parking? What are like the ratios of parking units to dwelling units as a result? And then there's also the site servicing piece. So some really high level concepts that just show, how would we bring water, sewer, and stormwater services into the site? What are some alignments of those lines that we, would probably look to see? And what might some of the demands from development be, based on the concepts we provided? Like, what would be the demand generated for water and sewer? And again, a lot of this was studied through the servicing analysis that was done early on, and then aligned back to the development that was proposed. So you can see there's examples of some of the imagery that's included in the report. And again, it really intended to provide a guide for further detailed planning and design activities that would come with a specific proposal or project. And then finally, on the implementation side, so there are a number of broader recommendations to support implementation of the Oscar Lands Master Plan, and really recommendations to help ensure that the vision and direction of this plan gets reflected in the actual development and build out. So that includes a high level outline of the city's development process for the site, and some general phasing principles. How do we want to phase this, the development of the site in over time? We don't want to see leapfrogging. We want it to be incremental and coordinated. What are, some recommended zoning amendments that are going to be needed? Again, the current comprehensive development zone in effect for the site is going to need to be changed and tweaked a little bit to accommodate the vision of the master plan. So there's some recommendations on that. There's a summary of the city's land disposition policy and process, which is, again, as a document for prospective developers as well. It's good information for them to have. It's all kind of in one place, right? So they know, if I want to acquire land, if I want to lease, get a for example, a nominal lease for an affordable housing development on the site, this is the process, that I'm going to have to go through. There's also some planning and design guidelines to help inform future development proposals. So, when a developer comes to the city and is, looking to acquire land and they're, formulating, a housing project, there's a bunch of guidelines there to inform the design. And again, they're flexible, but the goal would be to see as many of them reflected in the individual designs for each project as possible. And then finally, there's a bit of a subdivision strategy that shows, right off the hop, like how could we subdivide the site to one, like get the internal road, right of way surveyed out, but also like, how would we kind of cut it up at first? So in the future, when developers come in and they're looking for a piece of land for a project, we can sort of, take it out of, smaller pieces instead of like subdividing a little piece out of the entire site, if that makes sense. So there's some direction there. So that's it for my presentation. I know I only had about 15 minutes here, and I apologize if I went through it pretty quickly, but I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions, comments, have any discussion. I know all this information is in the council agenda package as well, but again, happy to answer any questions. And if there is any further discussion needed after this meeting or this presentation, my contact information is available, and I'm happy to chat further on it.
Appreciate the presentation, Mr. Penner. It's nice to see a plan come together for these lands. Council, any questions? Anything you'd like to ask or state? Councilor Orlando and then Councilor Palmer.
Your worship, thank you. I just would like to thank Mr. Penner for doing the presentation and also putting on the open houses. I know myself, other councillors, and members of the Revelstoke Community Housing Society attended to participate. The only comments I have at this point, and I would welcome, of course, all other councillors to speak first, is that I know that the co-chair of the Revelstoke Community Housing Society, Ms. Sheena Wells, is in attendance in person today, and I would just request the mayor, if possible, provide her the opportunity to provide questions or comments once council has had a chance to discuss.
That's something that I will do. Thank you. Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. And also thank you to Dan and to staff for putting this ahead. It's well overdue to have a master plan for this area. I think some of the developments that we've done there, including affordable housing in the past, were kind of on an ad hoc basis. And in hindsight, could have been better with the master plan. And this will help prevent or help us make better decisions in the future. So I'm very appreciative of that. The public engagement, I think, has been largely around the affordable housing, the 275 and council members. And I think that was kind of a prompting for looking at this. And so that's been an important aspect for council. The question I have is on the environmental side. Was this referred to the environmental committee at all? And was there any comments specifically on that strip that's on the side? I'm glad to see it there, but I'm just wondering how much engagement there was with the public on that.
Mr. Simon.
Through your worship, Councilor Palmer, so it wasn't specifically referred to the Environmental Advisory Committee, but some of the feedback that we did receive from the community was how critical preservation of that informal walking trail through the northeast and southeast end of the property was, and how important it was to try and maintain some buffer from adjacent properties and keep some ecological value on the property. It's a balancing act, right? So it was certainly one of the principles that was present as part of the public engagement, and staff and our consulting team felt that this was an appropriate balance to maintain a good chunk of the lands as a dedicated natural area, in addition to the park space, as well as the little gateway area at the front that will provide some amenities and green space for the community. But it's a good chunk of land, and when we went and walked the site too, it's really the only area that's kind of naturally separated with a little bit of steep slopes. And towards the east end of the site is where the most dense vegetation is. And some of the preliminary environmental reports that have been done for previous projects kind of affirm those findings as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad to see it there. If anything, the inclination, from my perspective, would be bigger. And a couple comments on the orientation of the property, and Dan did explain that about the higher density. And on the north end of that, I think it's a very, very good candidate because it doesn't interfere with sight lines or shadowing. It's against busy transportation corridor. And I would certainly be supportive on the north end, even higher buildings if they're feasible. I don't know if they'd be feasible from a developer perspective at this point. I think that's good. How, looking for areas that we can have higher density that doesn't impact, negatively impact other areas. And that also provides opportunity for better environmental protection as well. Of the two concepts, I definitely favor the second one. I think it's a more prudent approach. It allows that other land for some more flexibility in the future. So again, it's a policy document. I'm assuming both with this, the recommendation that both of those remain embedded in the report.
Did you speak to it, Mr. Song?
Yeah, through your worship, if you want me to, so that it's for public who may be
Yes.
listening. The intent with the two concepts is because there's so many moving pieces at the city right now. The whatever you want to call it, the arena redevelopment project, I guess, is maybe the most apt description. With that working in the background, and obviously we only have limited land where it can potentially be located. Oscar Street is an obvious candidate. We wanted to make sure that we pursued a concept that did have an alternative should council and the community decide that that's the appropriate location. We didn't want to get a year into trying to implement this master plan and then all of a sudden be like, ooh, actually we want to locate the new multiplex arena, whatever it's going to be called, on the Oscar Street lands. We got to revisit this master plan. So instead of doing the work twice, we wanted to do it once, but it is totally at council's discretion. We could follow either plan. And the nice thing is the phasing starts from the south and works its way to the north. So we do have some time, but it is critically important that as we do move forward over the next 12, 18 months, that we start to firm up the location of where a new arena multiplex would be, because it will ultimately have impacts on development of this parcel. So
Follow up, Council.
And then I think my final comment is on the transportation. So we have the Edward Powerhouse Road, the Townley Road, and then the railway link. So this transportation thing, I was sort of hoping it would have been vetted out a little bit more. And that might be just something to keep in consideration with the master transportation plan. What does this look like for all of South Side future? And I'm thinking for egress out of the community specifically, there may be some opportunities. I don't know. I don't have any sort of preconceived ideas. In a way, I would like to see those as we move ahead, maybe when there's some real proposals coming in. How does that help the community as a whole? I think that's all my comments. Appreciation again to the staff and our consultants on the work on that. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Councillor Stigner, do you have any?
Yes, sir. Thank you through the chair. Thank you to Mr. Penner and to staff for the presentation. Very informative. I think the elephant in the room for me is what we're doing with the sewage lagoon treatment facility plant and whatever we're doing at Oscar Street land. The value of that land is directly tied with the smell that's uphill and upwind of that facility. So, it's a great concept and I love it. And like the housing is desperately needed. I do have some concerns about having, all affordable housing, all, centered in one location. There's not really integration into the community. It's all kind of pushed next to a sewage lagoon treatment plant. It's and I think it's a concern that we need to address. And the committee of the whole, you guys talked about that. Fortunately, I wasn't here for that conversation. But it looks like there's a lot in the works with that sewage lagoon treatment plant. And I think that's kind of like one of the key pieces of getting right, because otherwise, who wants to play in a pickleball court downhill, downwind from that.
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Simon.
Through your worship, just one item that's important. I know Mr. Black wants to speak towards the technical side from the wastewater treatment plant. But staff are very cognizant. Planning has a really nasty history of putting marginalized communities adjacent to land uses that are not desirable, heavy industrial, wastewater treatment plants, etc. We're very cognizant of that. The city only has so much land that we can use for genuine affordable housing. And with this particular property, some of the principles that are embedded in the master plan, it's about a 70-30 split of non-market housing compared to market housing. So it will be a community, and the principles in the plan also state to, you don't put all the non-market housing in one building and then all the market housing in another building. It's supposed to be integrated and mixed throughout to build a real genuine neighborhood. Obviously, it'll be more non-market housing than market housing, but keep in mind that non-market housing, it'll be a sliding scale. You might have some where rental rates are only reduced 5 or 10% below standard market. And then you might have others where, because of that, it creates financially viable operating models that you can have deeply subsidized units in the same building. So we are really aware of that. And the plan intends to accomplish that by providing flexibility. So we have our partners such as RCHS that come forward, as long as it's approvable by the government for funding. You'll have buildings where maybe 50% of units are somewhat subsidized, 20% are deeply subsidized, and then 30% are market to help offset the cost of subsidizing those units. So we're very aware of it. And with the wastewater treatment plant, I know Mr. Black and his team are working very hard to address those challenges. And I don't know if council wants or Mr. Black wants to speak to that a little bit more, or if we want to keep working ahead.
Mr. Black? No, we haven't gone any further yet. We have a meeting tomorrow that we're dealing with some of this stuff, but we're not any further and don't have any final decision on how we move forward. Any other comments from council? Councilor Devlin, any comment on the plan?
Nothing that hasn't been already discussed. Obviously, the thank you to staff and our consultants for a very in-depth and wonderful to read master plan. But other than that, I think specific points that I would bring up have all been brought up. So thank you again, and that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you. Councilor Chair? Any
We
comments?
come back to the Councilor Palmer has a chance.
Okay. Councilor Palmer, another comment?
Yeah, just, and I don't want to belabor the lagoon point, but it's a very valid point Councilor Stephenhurst brought up. And the disappointment of the community having a plan that was a lot of resources went into was approved and now unapproved. Basically, it feels like interaction with the province on bad faith on the province's part, and the implications, notwithstanding that whole issue, which we don't want to get into right now, but the land values, part of the argument of the lagoon staying is we couldn't afford a big plant, but now this affordability's ballooned into something huge. And something that wasn't considered in the past is the land value of the lagoon. So maybe when we have those discussions in the future, saying, you know, do we go back to square one on this? Maybe we do need a proper plant, because as long as we got lagoons, it doesn't matter how well that's run. There will be episodes of smell in that area.
Thanks. Councilor Orlando, do you have any comment before I go back to Councilor Cherry and then Ms. Wells?
Your worship, just, yeah, real quick, trying to avoid using the word bloom as Councilor Palmer did, just joking. Yeah. Hopefully we can move forward with the province on next steps with the sewage treatment plant, and in terms of concentrating housing at this location, as I'm sure everyone on council knows, that the plans for the site next to Southside Market on 4th, 420 Downey Street, 165 unit project are moving forward. So that will certainly build capacity in affordable and near market rental housing. The Revelstoke Community Housing Society is also pursuing other construction projects likely in this area. So it's great to have this. It's necessary for us to have these plans in place so we can take the next steps as well. But ideally, what we're going to do is improve the issue dramatically, and my hope is that comes in partnership with the province to provide an even better facility, a more expensive facility, albeit that will improve for people future construction, but especially for all of the immediate neighbors right now.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Cherry.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think this master plan is a great document. They've done very well in blending all of the different types of housing, including mitigating sight lines, shadow lines, all of that, while still being able to keep a lot of natural space. Most of council here has kind of already jumped on a lot of the points that I would have also commented on, but appreciate seeing this move forward. I think it was done well. It was done in a timely fashion, and I'm excited for the future on how this all plays out.
Great, appreciate the comments. I'm very supportive of the plan and really appreciate the work, Mr. Penner, that you and your colleagues have put together with our staff. So thank you for that. Ms. Wells, would you like to speak as co-chair of the Revelstoke Community Housing Society, or would you like to turn it over to Mr. Brooks Hill?
No. We talked about who would do those, yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. Just a couple questions. Is it possible for the files that are being created as a part of this master plan, so map surveys, some of the data would be made available for the Housing Society as we move forward on pursuing funding for further projects on the land, the sort of documentation and having that already ready to go as a part of our applications would be super helpful.
Okay, Mr. Simon, you want to make formal comment?
Through your worship, yeah, I don't see any concerns with that. I know that Mr. Penner and his team, and he might be able to comment specifically, but I think there's some technical files that we can provide where your development consultants can then use it and not have to repeat the work.
Yeah, totally. And then in section 4.3, about the existing water service at Humbert, stating that the service, it can service the majority of the development site. Wondering if we can confirm that the 2 to 3 lots neighboring our existing spot could utilize existing services. Just want confirmation from the consultants on that. And then if the consultant could also estimate a limit of the number of units that could utilize the existing water main. And if so, or if there's a comment on those, could those be added to the memo? Just with the history of like what we've learned and how the servicing and how to work back and forth on this, if this information is available, that'd be super helpful.
Mr. Black, do you want to weigh in on this?
Thank you, Worship, and council. At this time, once we loop that water main through the whole network, not an issue. At this time, there are no lots. There's one lot available for servicing right now. And we have funding to extend servicing water, sewer, and road in the amount of money. So I believe it's around $300,000. So we will extend the road in accordance with this master plan with the utilities. Pre-service future lots. I believe that the systems that are in place at the completion of that work will support another 1 or 2 buildings of housing.
Councilor Cherry.
Thank you, Worship. Through the chair, Your Worship, to Director Black, just to elaborate on that a bit. Do you have a timeline, an estimated timeline for completion or start of said project?
I do, to Your Worship, to council, the work should be completed this summer.
Amazing news. Thank you.
Follow up, Ms. Wells.
Can we have it in the memo? or noted in the thing. There's
Yes,
funding available right now, and so, yeah.
yeah, absolutely, we can
Cool.
do that. Good,
Thanks, everyone.
thank you, appreciate it. All right, council, we have a motion here in your package. Does someone want to put that on the table for me, please? Councillor Devlin,
I move that the Oscar Street Lands Master Plan created by Urban Systems for the city of Revelstoke dated February 2024 be approved.
seconder for the motion, Councillor Palmer. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion has passed unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Penner and your team. We appreciate all your hard work on this. Mr. Simon, Mr. Black, Mr. Attia, thank you. Appreciate it all. All right, we're going to move on to item 12A, correspondence, historic light poles. We have a request from the Public Art Committee to save some of the light poles. Do you want to speak to this at all, Mr. Black? I do have a motion that I have here that I could put on the table, but if you want to speak to it, or you want me to move my motion? All right, so I'm going to put a motion on the table here that the city of Revelstoke, based on the Public Art Committee's recommendation, commit to storing any and all surplus historical light poles to be repurposed for future art projects highlighting Revelstoke's past. Someone want to second that motion? Councillor Cherry. And I'll speak just briefly to it and then get Mr. Black to speak to it. So some of the light poles, as we take them down and move forward, will not be in a condition to be repurposed. Some will be repurposed for our own use as light poles. And then, of course, we'll have some that will become surplus that we can utilize for the Public Art Committee. But I'll let Mr. Black speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. As council is aware, with the Grizzly Plaza project and the adoption of a night sky ordinance in the community, our existing acorn lights that are throughout the commercial core no longer meet that guideline. As a part of the Grizzly Plaza grant program and a little public outreach we did, we adopted a new light standard for the community, and those will be going up in Grizzly Plaza in the next month and a half. Maybe 2 months, depends on procurement and delivery of the equipment. But then we will have some leftover poles. The poles that we have are old. We can't get them again. In order to replace them, they have to be sand cast at a foundry in the States. And it gets really expensive. So we will put those in storage, and as they become surplus, and by surplus, I mean that we don't have another place to use them. Right now, we have, I believe, 2 poles at the yard. So if a car hits one, we're down to 1. So we do want to have a few surplus while we're replacing the existing acorn poles. Right, once those become surplus, then they would be available for a Public Art Committee's use.
Great, appreciate that comment. Any comments, questions from council? Councilor Palmer?
Just a question on the, I'm just thinking on the sort of liability or the condition of these, so how they get used as public art, because I understand there's quite a bit of structure underneath these poles, so are the ones that are like rotten or whatever, will they be disposed or will they be stored for future art, or how does that look like?
This recommendation came forward today. We will have to look at the condition of the poles, and if they are structurally inadequate, fractured, cracked, etc., then we will not allow them to get thrown out or utilized. But I anticipate we will have a few poles that can be utilized for this art project.
Councilor Chair.
Thanks, Your Worship. I sit on the Public Art Committee, so I just wanted to weigh in on this a little bit. We haven't actually seen what the potential use is yet. They may not need to be structurally in shape. They may only be partially used. They could be cut up. I just want to keep that into consideration before we throw out or recycle some of these without consideration of the usage.
Yep, thank you for that, Councilor Palmer.
Yeah, certainly see the good intentions and stuff like that. I'm just being a little bit cautious. You know, this is a decision on the fly. Again, we haven't had time to consider it. I'm aware that the city has a an old boneyard, that there's other things that would be considered previous artwork, including our old Revelstoke sign coming in that it's been sort of tossed in. I just aware of that, and I don't, no, I'm definitely not opposed to it. It's just, you know, what does this end up being? And I guess, you know, quite frankly, I was kind of appalled when I saw some of the previous historic things that the city has had were kind of thrown in a boneyard. And so I think the discussion is very, very prudent in how that's actually administered, I guess is the question. Wouldn't want to make this a bigger project than it needs to, but I'm just wondering if it maybe should be referred to a committee just for a little bit deeper, sober thought rather than just creating expectations, or if we just push ahead. I'm fine either way. But
I'm supportive of us just pushing ahead because we're going to be able to put them aside. We want to make sure that we have surplus in case something gets knocked over. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that, you know, I've had that conversation about what's been kind of placed in, as you say, the boneyard, and I'm like, do you know that stuff is there? And you go, okay, so is some of that able to be used for art or utilized in another capacity or recycled? And because they're cast aluminum, are they not? These light poles?
I believe you're correct. It could be
cast iron, whatever. And so, you know, one would have to be crafty to utilize them for something else. But as Councillor Cherry said, if they could be put aside and then utilized even in pieces, it would be appropriate for that sort of thing.
If I might, Your Worship, your assessment of the risk is real. And I would suggest that we would need to evaluate them and at least visually inspect them prior to them going out, if they're going to be used to support any weight or anything like that. If it's just a pole with no structure attached to it and just a pole, they're 14 feet, 16 feet tall. The risk is pretty small if there's nothing attached to it, but if it becomes a structural element, then the Arts Committee is going to have to undertake a structural analysis of those poles to ensure that they meet code.
Okay, all right. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried. Thank you. All right, Ms. Delassalle, do we have any questions from the press?
One moment, please, Your Worship.
Yeah.
I have one question from Melissa Jameson, reporter with Stoke FM.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Melissa writes, "Hi, I may have missed this, but does the Oscar Street plan include or incorporate the affordable housing project with BC Housing at 420 Downey Street? Are there any updates on the Downey Street housing project? Thank you, Melissa."
And so it doesn't, the Oscar Street plans doesn't include the BC Housing project, but we still have Miss Wells here in the room. So I will ask if she has an update as to what's moving forward.
Thanks for the question. The initial timeline that we were given by BC Housing to know who was selected or if we were selected was a week and a half. That hasn't, time is coming on. So
7 years ago.
Yeah. Which would have been remarkable for them to turn it around that quickly. So I'm not sure. We're just sort of waiting any day to hear. So no update for now.
All right, good, thank you. So Councillor Orlando.
Yeah, Your Worship, just a quick comment, and thanks, Ms. Wells, for chipping in there. The deadline was, I think, February 4th or February 5th, and it included a ton of work on behalf of Ms. Wells and the rest of the Revelstoke Community Housing Society Board to fit that in there. I just wanted to thank her for that. Just for clarity on the timeline there, it would be a fairly quick turnaround. So.
Great, appreciate it. All right, that's all the questions, Ms. Delassalle?
Yes, Your Worship.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. All right, council, I'm going to ask for a motion to terminate Counselor Staples, Counselor Orlando, all those in favor? Motion's carried. We are done for the day. Thank you, staff. Thank you, council, for being present. We're done.
Oh. See the other on the cover? Oh, that's something.